Summary of the Maimer, B'chafei B'Kislev. This is on page, it begins on page Daf Chavtes of Torah. So the Gemara says that on the 25th of Kislev, that's when we have Chanukah, and what it commemorates is when the Greeks came into the Heichal, into the base of Mikdash, they made all the oil impure. But then when the Hashmonai rulers overpowered the Greeks, they were victorious, they looked for oil that was still pure, and they only found one jar of oil that had the seal of the Kohen Gadol. And it didn't have much, but it had enough just to light for one day. There was a miracle, and it lit for 8 days. Then the next year, they made Chanukah as a Yomtov with praising Hashem, Hallel, and middah, thanksgiving. So we need to understand, what is this idea of Hallel, of praise, and what is this idea of middah, thanksgiving? Also, why is this miracle specifically commemorated, the miracle of the light and the oil, more than any other miracle? Next, what's the connection between lighting Menorah and Hallel and middah, praise and thanks? Now, what we're going to look at is the meaning, the symbolism of the Menorah. So the idea is that the Menorah is 7 branches, and that's because we have 7 middos, 7 emotional traits. And what we aim to do through lighting Menorah is to add light to each of our emotions, so that each of our emotions are guided by the light of holy wisdom, and therefore they're directed towards a holy path. Now, Yaakov had 70 descendants originally, and that corresponds to these 7 personality types. And Yaakov is also about, like we said in the previous Maimer, linking together the Yud with the Akev, the highest spiritual heights, and in particular the light of Chochma, again, the light of wisdom, with the heel, with the practical. That is the Menorah. Then we also have, right after the Menorah, there's the keteres, the incense. And the idea of incense is that we not only want to elevate our inner personality, our emotional traits, but also our practical behavior and our self-expression, which is divided in general into 3 parts: thought, speech, and action. But all of them are lower, they're more external than our inner emotions and our personality. But we want to elevate them to Hashem as well. Now, actually, there's 4 parts that we want to talk about in this Maimer. In the base of Mikdash every day, they would first offer the blood of the carbon tamid, then they would have Menorah, then keteres, the incense, and finally they varm the limbs of the animal, of the sacrifice. So what do these all mean? First, let's look at it through the lens of Shema. So in Shema, the first verse says that Hashem is one. We realize that there's only Hashem. But then later on, we again say b'chol nafshecha, with our whole soul. The difference is that when we start off Shema, we're talking to the godly soul. The godly soul recognizes that there's only Hashem. Then the animal soul sees things as all independent realities and all very important. Every pleasure is important. The news is important. Everything is important. And then we have to direct it, Baruch Shem, that all of those things are really part, the name of the glory of Hashem's Malchus, Hashem's royalty, Hashem's kingship, and they're all really part of Hashem as well. So Shema is the godly soul that sees only Hashem. That's the only thing, and Hashem is one. And then the animal soul is Baruch Shem. Then we're trying to bring ourselves to a passion and a love for Hashem. And we have a few stages. There's b'chol levavcha, with all our heart, and b'chol nafshecha, with all our soul, and b'chol middah, with all our might. B'chol levavcha, with all our heart, which includes the 2 hearts, the double base, the godly soul and the animal soul. And that represents the first part of the service in the base of Mikdash, which is the Dama Tamid, the blood from the daily sacrifice, because the sacrifice, the carbon, was from an animal, and that represents the energy of an animal. Animals are stronger than people. People might be smarter than animals, but animals are stronger. And that represents the passion we can bring from the Nefesh Habehamis. The Nefesh Habehamis is more emotional and passionate than the godly soul, and especially because it's far from Hashem, that yearning can create extra passion as well. And that's the idea of blood, which is hot and passionate. Then the next stage is b'chol nafshecha, that giving over all our expression, machshav divrei ma'aseh, thought, speech, and action, all over and directed towards Hashem. Then we have the Menorah. The Menorah is about having all 7 emotional traits, which all towards Hashem. And the Menorah is lit with the light of Chochmah, which is Torah. And also with once we've had Torah, the light of Torah, to guide our emotions, we then move on to Keteris, which is like we mentioned before, the more external expressions of ourselves, machshav demaisa, thought, speech, and action. And in particular, the main type of action is tzedakah. It's the generic idea of a mitzvah. And what tzedakah can accomplish is that it allows us to, our inner self, our pnimius halev, the inner part of our heart, to unite and come together with Hashem's inner part. That we aim to make our yesh, our sense of ego and self, or nullified to Hashem's ayin, that unknowable nothing. Whereas Hashem responds by bringing down his ayin, that unknowable nothing beyond us, into our yesh, into our world. And that is connected to Keteris, which, as we said, is the external expression, something that is not food, it's not light, but on the other hand, it creates a sense, which reach, sense, is something spiritual, something that we can't measure easily we don't see it, etc. Finally, we have the fourth part of the daily avodah in the base of middos, which is the limbs, and that represents our pleasures, because the fats were offered on the mizbeach, and fat relates to the concept of pleasure, that our pleasure should be from Hashem. So when we daven, we're trying to accomplish a few things, all very difficult, but let's think about them and try to work at least in some way on all of them. So we have, first of all, the dam, the blood, which represents our passion towards Hashem. Then we have the light of the Menorah, which is directing our emotions towards godly and holy perspectives. Then we have the Keteris, the incense, which represents our external expression, thought, speech, and action, that although they're external, they reach somewhere very high and deep. And finally, the limbs, which represents our pleasure, that our pleasure should be in godly pursuit. And tomorrow we'll explain how all this relates more specifically to Chanukah.